bring up our lovely three panelists. So if you could just come up and sit down, and then I'll quickly introduce you. And we did have a last-minute change. I kid you not, last night was a bit of a whirlwind for me. So we had, unfortunately, two panelists drop out who have very, very good reasons for that. And I both wish them very, very well. And thanks a lot for Mel for jumping in, who runs HQ Therapy Rooms. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. But yeah, welcome our panelists. So let's start with you, Dom. Can you tell us a little bit more about your story? And before we go into the details of what actually happened, maybe just initially about Social Chain and setting that up, and just giving a bit of context.
Yeah, so I co-founded Social Chain 4 years ago, yesterday I think. So 4 years old. And that was kind of born out of dropping out of university, doing sports science. I started a big social media page called Student Problems, which grew from like me following it to 20,000 people. And we went, myself and Steve, who co-founded it with me, we went around the UK and finding out there was other big social media pages, kids who had started big social media pages, and we essentially rounded up every single big kid who started a social media page. So we had the biggest food page in the world, biggest fitness page in the world, and to the point where we got about 230 social media assets. And we started talking to brands about the fact that we knew how to reach young people because we had this media. So from that we kind of grew a consultant arm of our business, and also continued to grow the media by acquiring more channels and starting more channels. And we never intended to start an agency. We just knew, we said we knew about young people. I think we did know a little bit about them, and started to develop brands marketing strategy. And then because we own the media as well, we could execute it as well through our channels. So we kind of together collectively discovered we had an agency and then a media arm of the business. So 4 years ago, we raised investment from one of our clients, who turned around to us and said, "Hey, do you want to kind of make this Social Chain thing official?" We kind of bit his hand off and said yes, and that was the kind of start of Social Chain. And we kind of brought in an accounts team, client services team, and people to run the media business, and we kind of grew both aspects of the business simultaneously. And kind of for the first year, we're kind of riding this wave of celebrations because we kind of went from strength to strength. We kind of had some really big client wins in the early years. One of our first clients was Spotify. One of our other first clients was Microsoft. So for us, like going from essentially traveling the world, doing a little bit of consultancy with some people, to working with these big brands was like normal. You know, we always thought that we never experienced any hardship. We had some good PR around us, and then we won Disney as a client, and we won a couple of campaigns with Fox. So in the kind of the first 9 months of the business, we were working with some of the biggest brands in the world. So we were kind of always celebrating as a business. So we, you know, as you would as a startup, when you've got 15, 20 people, your Friday nights would involve around, you know, getting around the team and saying, "Well done, everyone, for the amazing stuff that's happened that week," and you'd go out, have a few drinks and celebrate. And that was the kind of first 9 months of the business, and it was really rapid growth. We grew from kind of 5 or 6 of us in the early days to about 20, 25 of us. Moved to Manchester, got a big office, and then that's kind of that's when we started to get a couple of problems in the business. After kind of when we saw the investment cash started to run out and cash flow started to catch up with us, which we had no idea that cash flow was a thing. We thought as soon as you did an invoice, someone was paid it. Who thought that actually happened? So we just assumed that, you know, once we've delivered a project for a client, they'd pay the next day. So a couple of things happened. We were all going to go on a team paintballing session, which was kind of a bit of a celebration during summer, and woke up that morning and was driving into the office, and I'm getting messages from Steve and one of our potential investors who we're speaking to about growing the business, saying, "Hi Dom, did you send this email?" And I'm sat there in my car like looking at this email, and the email said, so Christian, for context, is now our CFO, but was our potential investor at the time, said, "I don't know what this Christian guy's all about. He's a bit of a knob." And I was sat there thinking, did I send that? No, I didn't send that email. And what happened was my emails had been hacked by somebody. My Gmail had been hacked, and they'd emailed our potential investors, all our clients, and people within the business, things pretending to be me. So paintballing's cancelled. We turn the cars around and go to the office, and we have to kind of look what's happened. We've been hacked, and we spend the next day trying to manage what the outfall is. And at that point, we had 3 or 4 clients pull out campaigns because of the things that were said about them. We had Fox, who could no longer work with us because it was just after the Sony hack, and for security and data protection, they can't work with anyone who's been hacked. And the potential investors that we were speaking to about raising funds were just being insulted, and we had to explain to them what went on. And that was for me the real first rock in the road, where we thought, God, this isn't supposed to be easy. And I remember how I felt that day. It was kind of a low point. I think we all have them periods in life where we hit that point, which is the worst we ever felt, and that was that for me. And we managed to get a couple of the clients back. We still can't work with Fox. They can't even reply to our emails anymore because of policy. And then we had to kind of go along building backup relationships and so on and so forth. Fortunately, managed to raise the investment from the guys. We raised significant 7 figures, which kind of funded our growth. And as the numbers got bigger, the pressure got bigger. We brought more people in, and still the cash flow.
Give us, Dom, just give us an idea of the numbers so that people can really understand the fast growth that you went through.
So we founded November 2014. The first year we did 50k for that 2 months, and then from that into year 2, we were doing 2.5 million.
Yeah.
So, for me, for us as 21, 22-year-olds, that's big number for us with a small team. And cash flow issues are still a problem. We're bringing more people in. We're using the investment wisely. And then we have this thing where Legacy would say, when things are going well, which they still were going well, we were still winning big clients, we'd go out and celebrate. So myself and Steve are having to put this public face on around celebrating. So we have to go out, we have to be seen to be drinking, we have to be seen to be having fun within the business. And it's then we have a bit of, from the hacking to the next kind of 8 months, a real rocky patch. That investment we actually raised was very close to running out in the first 4 months due to a number of factors, mainly cash flow. And we were unsure whether we'd be able to make wages a couple of months. And that's when the celebrating on Friday nights for me turned to drinking on Friday nights to escape the feeling of the stresses of the entire week. So I would go out with the team, but my entire intention as soon as it got to Friday at 2 o'clock was to drink myself into a state where I wasn't there, and I was just gone, and I was just in my own head. So that was a very long spiraling period for about 8 months, where every single week, every single weekend, I'd be there drinking, I'd be there having more and more and more, to the point where it came into midweek, and the midweek drinking Wednesdays, Thursday nights, to the point where I had kind of a couple of instances where I was like, hey, maybe I should stop drinking. Maybe there's something wrong with me, I don't know really what's going on. I went out one night and broke my ankle on a Thursday night. So I went out for an opening of a bar, woke up the next day, fell down my stairs, coming up to bed, and I've got a broken ankle. So Friday morning, and my emails are going off from clients, from people in the work, and where are you, what's going on? And I'm sat there in A&E waiting to get an x-ray with my cast, and like, why am I doing this to myself? Why am I doing this? That wasn't enough to make me stop drinking.
And the business is still
going. It's going
and
faster
growing and growing and growing.
So yeah, we're getting even faster. So this point now is start of our just after our 2nd birthday, and we're getting on to the point where we're signing off significant 6-figure campaigns, and every single time we win new business, for me, it's not amazing feeling. It's not a good feeling. It's anxiety. I'm like, we have to deliver this now. That kind of, they have to pay us at the end of it. the costs we're starting to pay out for some of the suppliers get bigger. So we're more dependent on them paying us. So if projects don't go well, we're not going to be able to keep the lights on. And so got to a point where there was a night where I said, I need to stop drinking. And we went out as a team, and the version of me, the drunk version of me, was called Drunk Dom. So he was always the person that I would turn into when I got alcohol. And when I was kind of growing up and when I was younger, Drunk Dom was always an extension of my personality. He was fun. He was kind of a nice person. He was just a bit of a normal guy, really. Drunk Dom, when I'm in this state, turned into a horrible person. Was very rude. Was very arrogant. And he actually, kind of the tipping point for me was I insulted one of the members of the team. Said some really quite derogatory things to him, which kind of made him really contemplate his position within the business. And upon hearing what I said the next day, I said, okay, I need to stop drinking now. I can't do this anymore. So that was on the Saturday night. Sunday, said I need to stop drinking. Monday, went to go and see a therapist who put me through a course of CBT where I kind of coached myself out of drinking, and never drank again after that point. And then for the last 2.5 years now was continuing to grow Social Chain. The first year of not drinking was a state of trying to make myself better, because I became an alcoholic, and trying to make myself better and run the business at the same time took all my energy, everything out of me. And it's only been really in the last 18 months where I've been able to think clearly, get my head above the kind of like day-to-day, kind of like in the dirt, running around, and be able to take a kind of different approach to life and trying to put my happiness first while continuing to run the business and scale it. And that kind of point where we got hacked, I've kind of suppressed it 5 or 6 times since then, and it keeps getting to a point of lower and lower and more pressure coming onto me. But because I now have learned the skills to cope with that feeling, I'm 1,000 times more resilient now to what a bad day would be then. Wouldn't even scratch the surface now. It's building that kind of mental resilience that we talked about earlier, which has really helped. So long story short, sorry for so long, but we've gone from 4 people to 150 people across New York, Manchester, Berlin, London in 4 years, and worked with some pretty cool clients.
Thank you so much for opening up on that and sharing that story with everyone, especially all agency owners in the room, so everyone really resonates with all the different things. Maybe not everyone can say that they've built the 150 person agency. Maybe not everyone wants to, but it's different reasons for different things. But we'll talk a little bit more about some of the different things, different techniques that you've used as well in the moment. Mel, let's hear your angle on this, because I think from a professional point of view, there's going to be a lot of value for you being on this panel today and giving some really, really great insights. But maybe you could just tell a little bit more about what you do and sort of also what inspired you to get into what you actually do.
Into therapy. Okay.
Not the same thing that got me there.
Sorry?
Not the same thing that got me there.
No. Well, you'd be surprised. Okay, so my first career choice was photography. So I started out in the creative industry. And when I had my daughter, I found that very triggering. My second choice for profession in high school was psychology. So I opted at that moment to delve a little bit more into that, and I found it incredibly helpful, having counseling skills, raising a child. Then trained as a psychotherapist. I've since set up a large business in Haggerston and Dalston. We house about 60 therapists now there. So I sort of have experience of creative stuff, of therapy stuff, and of running a business. So that's a little bit about me.
Great. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things later. I'm sure you'll get some good opinions on that as well. And maybe moving on to you now, James. Tell us your journey into Sanctus and what Sanctus does for the world.
Yeah. Hi everyone. My name's James. I'm the founder of Sanctus. Yeah, I don't know where to start. I don't want to sort of go on too much of tell my life story, but similar to Dom in so many ways, and so much of what you shared as well. So I can resonate with it with a lot. Yeah, I also a uni dropout. Tried to start a business out of university because I thought that was cool. Basically didn't know what I wanted to do, so I was just like, the startup scene seemed exciting and cool, so I'd watched The Social Network, so I thought I'll do that. And yeah, it really, really resonated with what you were saying. And for 3.5 years, really building that business, I just kind of, the way I lived my life was kind of from the outside in. It was kind of like, who should I be to be successful? And I'll mold myself on that, rather than thinking, what do I value? What do I care about? This is how I'm going to be. I just kind of, I did it the other way around, and just compared myself to others and thought, I'll do that. And very much tried to kind of put on this kind of like, I know he's had a shout out today, this Gary V sort of CEO. That's who I tried to be. And over time, that I just kind of created this really large front. Didn't really show any vulnerability, didn't even know what that word meant, never talked about my feelings or anything like that. So mental health, for me, growing up was never, even in the early part of my career, was just certainly never on the agenda. And then in the kind of ashes of that business, as we shut it down, that was when all the feelings of uncertainty and anxiety and loneliness and fear and worry just kind of erupted out, really. And I actually got a normal job in London, but during that I really kind of really struggled with my mental health, basically, for the first time. Anxiety, panic attacks, just kind of day-to-day debilitating anxiety, which I'd never really faced, and didn't know what to do. Very scared, very worried about the anxiety, so a real circle, and ashamed, a little bit ashamed, of I'd kind of presented myself as this like strong character, and then sort of have to admit that I was struggling, and felt like a real knock to my pride and my ego, I suppose. So I just kind of hid it, didn't talk to anyone about it, and just continued to kind of put up this front of, oh, it's all good, it's all good, it's all good, until I just couldn't do it any longer, to be honest. Like I think I got to a point of, I can't hide how I'm feeling, and I kind of refuse to live my life that way, I suppose. So about 2 years ago, I ended up writing a blog post called Mental Health and Startups. That was like the scene that I'd been in. Wrote that and just kind of came out. I was like, this is me, this is what I've been going through. And I know it's not just me, basically. And that post really resonated with a lot of people. Ended up kind of, my other blogs were getting read like 30 times, and this one got read like 15,000. So that felt like viral to me. Not in your world, mate. in my world, that was very much viral. And I got a real great response, like an amazing response. And I just kind of then, like, I'd found this thing that I was really passionate about, because I was kind of healing myself, I suppose, and learning more about myself and kind of going on that whole inner journey, as you might want to call it. But also I felt like I was actually having an impact on the world and on other people. So I just kind of ended up just like writing more, sharing more. And I just kind of started like saying these things like, we all have mental health, or like questioning like, why don't we work on our mental health like we work on our physical health? Why are we being so reactive? Why are we waiting until we burn out like I did? Like, why don't we invest proactively into our mental health? And a lot of those kind of like notions became, I suppose, the crux and the core of what like the Sanctus brand is today. So started Sanctus really more as like a mission than a business, to be honest. More just kind of, look, let's change the perception of mental health. Let's try and create this world where people work on their mental health like their physical health. And we've got this like big vision to put the world's first mental health gym on the high street. Currently, that model is slightly different. We actually work with businesses, so we kind of create this safe space in a business where people can talk to someone about their mental health. So we place a coach in a business and allow employees or anyone at the business to just talk to someone who's completely impartial, completely confidential about where they're at. Been doing that for 2 years now. Worked with some amazing brands in London and beyond, a lot of agencies. And yeah, just been incredibly rewarding work and an amazing journey for me, to be honest, to kind of try not to make the same mistakes again whilst running a mental health business, because that would be a real irony. And it's not as easy as it is. It's not that easy. So
love it.
Yeah,
great, excellent. Thanks a lot for that as well. There is, with all the owners in the room, there is, and I know this myself as well. When I ran my agency, I definitely had it more then than I have had it now. Probably because now a lot of the things are going very well. When I was running my agency, a lot of things weren't going well, and I started building up this shell almost to like, oh, that employee let me down, all right, screw them, let them go, and that was one after another, and then a client let me down, one after another, and so many incidents happened after another that basically just made me become really strong in some way and just go like, oh, you know what, like, it's going to be fine. Next. And I never really stopped and looked back and went, am I actually fine? Am I okay? Like, do I need to do something? So I guess my question to all three of you, whoever wants to contribute to this, when is too much too much? Are there symptoms? Are there certain signs when you start feeling, actually, do you know what, I really need to start talking to someone?
I call that kind of feeling of like things go after each other. You create a mono mood, which is like one mood the whole time. You never get too high and you never get too low. If you have like bad news, it doesn't shock you. If you have good news, it shouldn't rock you, and you should be able to like kind of hold the same mood for the whole period. I was thinking the same thing the other day. I was like, basically my girlfriend was a bit annoyed that I couldn't get excited for a holiday, and I was like, I feel like I can't get excited for anything, because you know that something could come around the corner the other day and sideswipe you. So you've always got to be kind of ready for the negatives. And I did ask myself the question the other day. I was like, for the first time in a while, I was like, am I happy? Am I happy? And I was like, you know what? I'm not doing things that I used to do like 3 months ago. So I'm a little bit, you know, the mood's gone from like, say it's like normally like that. People, they go up and down. Mine's like that. I think it's dropped a little bit to like there now.
Yeah.
So I think I'm very conscious of whether that I am fluctuating, and I try not to get too high or get too low.
Yeah.
But every now and again, you do have to kind of have a look and say, is that trajectory going the right way or the wrong way? And if for me, right in this moment, sat here, being honest, it's going the wrong way. Yeah. So I need to work hard on how to get it the right way.
Well, what's your perspective on that? You know, from a professional point of view, are there particular symptoms that you see with clients that you work with, or know that you could say like those are things to watch out for specifically?
I would say that working with men, a common indicator that they're doing too much or things are starting to spiral out of control for them, they usually feel physical symptoms. They usually come in feeling their stress in a physical way. So they'll be sick in some way often. With women, it's probably more relational problems that start showing their stress in that sort of way initially.
What does that mean? Can you just explain that a little bit further?
About the relational issues with women?
Yeah.
I think women are looking for more connection necessarily. So like if those relationships start breaking down, then usually that's an indication they're in overwhelm in some way. So phrase the question to me in a slightly different way so I can help that with an answer.
I think it's quite broad, isn't it? I suppose the thing I'm looking for is for all the people in the room is, are there certain indicators to when you really start you really need to actually almost take the foot off the pedal a bit, and or not necessarily take the foot off the pedal, but like when there's been so many things, so many bad things that have happened in your life that you've just ignored, essentially. You've not processed at all. You've just moved on. You've just gone, yeah, okay, that's happened, done, next, right on. Like, is there a point where you go, actually, do you know what, I do need to deal with some of these things?
I mean, I think people will kick into coping strategies when they are in overwhelm or when they're coping with a lot of stress. And it's usually those coping strategies that work with them initially and then stop working after a while. So your coping strategy was drinking, it worked for a while, and then it moved into something else where actually the coping strategy was a problem. So it's something like that that will usually draw people into therapy. It'll be one of those coping strategies start falling apart, and they'll realize they don't have anything else to fall back on because that thing that they fell back onto stopped working. So maybe for a lot of people here, it's working too much. It's being a workaholic. And then the work just ends up driving you mad. The work that was the savior, the work that was your distraction, that helped you not engage with your feelings, then is actually the thing that drives you mad, and it starts causing all the problems.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, and you see that quite often happening. I'm going to take this one very, very big step deeper, and there is a topic that is, I don't know if dear to my heart is the right word to use for this, but essentially I've experienced 3 suicides in the last 3 years amongst agency owners, and I hadn't experienced this before in my whole life that frequently, and so and that was actually a big trigger point for me to put this event together, to start reaching out to people that I know that either have been affected by these stories. And I guess I want to talk a little bit openly about this. There's a lot of stats out there. One of the stats is that the effect is around 75% men basically take their life, more often to 25% women. And I just want to put that out there to you, and just what are your thoughts on that? Why do you think that is? Maybe James, we start with you.
Yeah, I was always actually making a link between the last 2 questions, because when you mentioned your experience of kind of going out day to day, taking knock after knock and blow after blow, it reminded me of a period in my last business where we were desperately pitching for money from investors, customers, and we were just going out into the world and just getting fucking slaughtered. Like, it was brutal. Like, day after day, just like, it's like going to war. Like, that's what it honestly felt like. We were just getting absolutely hammered, and I would come home at night and just, I was in bits. But I was in bits internally, but externally, I was just numb. Like, I'd completely numbed out, and I think the link I would make is, like, I think that for me was, that was my response. It was to just numb up, just like close up, just like turn myself into a rock and just like keep going. Because that's just how I thought you did it. Like, that's just what I thought you did. You just keep going, you keep going, and you keep going until it works. Like, I think perseverance, that's how I thought you sort of got successful or whatever. And I don't think it's actually just a trait in men. I think it's just like a human trait to just think, or just the way we've been conditioned perhaps in this generation or whatever, of just like, the harder you work and like, if you just take it all on and carry it all on yourself, it'll all be okay. And I think men in particular have been like given that narrative of being the breadwinner, of being the hunter, of being the, bringing the business home or the money in or whatever. And it's that load that if you don't talk to anyone and you bottle it up and you carry that much weight for that amount of time, which often leads people to the only answer they've got, which is sadly not wanting to live anymore. Which is, even to say that, like, gives me goosebumps, because it's tragic. For that to be the case is to something as so precious as human life. Like, even one suicide a year is too many. Yeah. In my opinion. So I think those 2 questions are linked, because I think those harrowing statistics just show how much people are carrying and how little they're sharing it, essentially.
Adding on from what James is saying, with men especially, there's a lot of lost connections. You don't have your friends. You go through a process where you get into work and you get on the kind of the rat race, the cycle where it's eat, sleep, work, repeat. You come home, you don't engage with people in positive ways. You know, I used to think the only time I ever saw my friends was when we'd go together and go out. We'd never actually talk about anything. We'd never actually have like any connections about how's life. So having a lot of the reason the men don't talk is because sometimes they don't feel like they've got anyone to talk to. They lose their best friends. They don't feel they can talk to their girlfriend about it. They don't feel they can talk to their parents about it because of the perception of masculinity as well. So combine that with kind of genetic reasons about men holding stress as well. They actually don't have people to speak to either. So them two factors together just means that guys just bottle it up and bottle it up and bottle it up until, you know, there is no option, like James said. Yeah,
it's quite fascinating, isn't it? Also the whole kind of seeing my daughter grow up and how whenever there was sort of birthdays or anything, and you know, they're 4 years and 3 years old, you could already see the differences in terms of how boys would behave. They would all run around as individuals, basically trying to climb a tree or play with a football or whatever. They wouldn't play together, and you would always see the girls all huddling up around the flower and, you know, chatting to each other. And even at that age already, you could almost tell like the differences in how relationships are built. Mm-hmm. Is that something from, you know, looking at from your perspective that I guess as well, maybe one thing that I'm quite curious is there a correlation between like impulsiveness in men and these sort of results, that maybe men think about consequences a bit less than women do?
I think in relation to suicide, men think about consequence more than women do. In my understanding of the statistics around men and women and suicide is that as many women, or just almost as many women, attempt suicide, but men are successful because maybe the shame of surviving that would be too much, so they make sure that it happens.
Wow,
if they do.
That's quite a powerful thing. Yeah,
yeah. So a lot of women struggle with that, you know, suicidal ideation as well.
Yeah,
but are more likely to make a cry for help.
Yeah.
Than actually a successful suicide.
So you know, there's lots of statistics out there, and it's always difficult with statistics. You know, which are true, which are not, and there's an overall downward trend according to some of the statistics that are out there. It's very debatable in many ways, and I don't really want to debate that part of it. I think just to maybe challenge some of that as well. Looking at the differences, and I count every single life as special in this question I'm going to ask now. There's no question about it, and every single number that's up or down is super important to me. But looking at the statistics, the numbers haven't changed from, say, 5,000 to 10,000 to 15,000. They've always been around 100 in the last probably 10 years or so. Now, but there has been an incredible amount of talk around mental health in recent years. I mean, I don't remember mental health being a topic at all when I grew up, and I don't think it's to do with the fact that I grew up in the environment that I did. I think it's just generally it seems like the last 5 years or so, it's just been top of the agenda of every organization that's out there, every business, every charity. You know, everyone is talking about it. What do you guys think was a trigger for that? What's the reason for that at the moment?
I think it was heads up, or whatever they call it. What do they call it?
Yeah, I think that. I mean, personally, I think there's just some like real kind of like macro forces going on in the world that have just kind of brought it out. I think on one level now is like, I think in humanity we've got the base of what we need now. Like we've got the kind of bottom of Maslow's hierarchy sort of thing, you know, the Wi-Fi and all that. You know, we've got like in the Western world at least, like everyone sitting here, like we've got shelter, we've got food, and actually most of us, like we have probably got a career as well in some form. We're gonna live, we're gonna survive. So I think naturally, just as like a kind of race, we're asking ourselves that question of like, what's next, like this kind of self-actualization piece. I think the awareness of our own consciousness, I think, is starting to grow, and I think you can't miss the kind of impact of technology. I think like what technology has done and the way that the phone in particular has penetrated our lives, I think it's brought up so much for all of us. More information, constant connection. like we're all in WhatsApp groups. Like groups are the thing that bring out all of our anxieties. Like we're in it constantly every single day. So I just think there are a load of forces that have come together at the same time that have meant that mental health is, it's not that it's just been like reported more, it's been felt more. And it's been felt more by every single one of us. And I think the world we live in today, you have to look after your mental health. Like, I don't know how you can live without doing it. It's not easy. You know, it's a bombardment of information, like friends that you didn't even like at school still want to meet up with you because they've got your number on WhatsApp. You know, like all these things like just come up for us because of the way the world is now. And then I think, unfortunately, suicide has played a part in that. And it's again tragic that it's had to get to that point. You know, we've had some quite high-profile suicides in the last 2 years. Robin Williams, Chester Bennington. You know, some famous actors, actresses. I think just loads of forces have come together, and I just think we're ready now. I actually think we're ready to start to talk about it and actually work on it and do something about it.
One of the things James said there was the Robin Williams. I think that was probably the tipping point where it went from being, where suicide went from this kind of being that thing that happened to people actually asking, like, how can someone who is so successful and have such an amazing life want to kill themselves? And that's, for me, I actually just Googled it, and that's what I was doing on my phone. I was actually looking at the day he died, which was the 11th of August, which was 2 months before World Mental Health Day. And if we analyse the social trends for hashtag World Mental Health Day, and it's 2014. That's the year where we see year-on-year growth from, I think it went for 2014, 2015 was 9 times, then it went 16 times to 2016, and then it's doubled since then, year-on-year, of people, you know, actually tweeting the hashtag World Mental Health Day. And yeah, 2014 seems to be the tipping point, and the key thing in that year was Robin Williams. And for me, yes, there's loads of other societal things factored, but if you wanted to put your hat on a single moment which kind of really changed it, it was Robin Williams.
So it's really interesting because, you know, this whole thing around saying like famous people and so on. I remember a lot of famous people taking their life throughout, you know, my years growing up, and also like in looking at history, a lot of artists, particularly artists. And I wonder sometimes, is there also, you know, is this a topic? And I guess I don't speak enough with other classes. You know, general people I hang out with is the people that are here in the room, and I wonder sometimes, is this topic only like so heavily debated at our level of society? And you know, there's a whole nother level of society that actually, who maybe possibly even think a little bit less. Yeah. You know, like, and I'm not saying that part of society is dumb. That's not the point. It's more about that because of the access that we have to information is maybe bigger to other people. Does that make us more vulnerable potentially
as a demographic?
Yeah, like to mental health issues?
Tough question. You don't want to get into too much social, political opinions, but I think coming back to the thing we were saying when Mel is coping strategies. If people can find ways to cope, everyone's coping strategy is different in certain different social classes. You may see people having better coping mechanisms, but I think it's something which is widespread conversation. I think people are talking about it, and I think people it's got no prejudice. It affects every single person, no matter what race, what background. But it comes down to the individual and how they manage to cope, what their coping mechanisms are. If they find something which they can put their release to, you know, you could make this as a claim why quite a lot of people have kids young and they therefore live for their kid because that's their purpose. But it's whatever. It affects everyone really, but it's like if you can find a way to cope with it, you won't have as big and as negative impact to suicide in other demographics where you may have someone who's got life of luxury who doesn't have on the surface anything to worry about, but they're constantly worrying and they can't understand why. So that might lead to more drastic decline in their mental health, for example.
I don't think we can put these things down to any one thing. But like what James was saying, is, the positive attention that mental health is getting at the moment is absolutely fantastic, and it's probably a whole range of things that have contributed to that. I do think that Heads Together was a great thing, happened in England. I think really great, raised profile. And Harry talking about himself gave a lot of people permission, maybe a lot of men permission. With regards to suicide, I think you're going to talk about suicide, you're talking about overwhelm and depression, you're talking about a form of self-harm, you're talking about anger. You have to open up conversations around anger. How do we express anger? How do we get over the stiff upper lip that's part of our culture? What do we do to give people permission to talk about that in itself? This whole cultural change that could happen to help improve statistics. Go on.
Sorry, have you finished?
I'm done.
I was just getting excited. I was just going to be a bit more contentious because I think you're touching on something that is a bit of a contentious issue, and if we're honest, like my problems as like a white guy who lives in London, like are laughable probably in comparison to plenty of other people in this country and beyond, right? Like if I list out my problems, it's like, oh, like what should I do with my new growing business? Like it's not a problem, but it is relative to me, and that doesn't mean that my problems aren't important and I shouldn't talk about them. So I actually do think if we're really honest, like the ability to work on your mental health right now is a rich man's thing. Like to work on your mental health, it costs money. Like average therapy session, 60 quid, weekly, £240 a month, coach, average 50, whatever, 75 quid, 150 quid a coaching session. To actually have not only the money to actually pay to work on your mental health, but even like access to the information of what the right thing is to do is like a problem of privilege at the moment. I don't know where I'm going with that, but I think that's just really important.
What you're saying, James, if we, again speaking from a white middle class background, we've taken the decision to make our lives more complicated by starting businesses, by putting ourselves out there. People who don't choose to do that, they may, again speaking openly, may have less complexity, so may never get into the point of having mental health issues.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. Like I think there are millions of people where whatever, and I know this, I think even though Sanctus, we have got a very kind of like white collar client list. I think one of the things that we've seen, no matter if we work with a recruitment business that's 14 people, we work with the BBC or Just Eat or Boston Consulting Group or a small advertising agency, like no matter what you do, who you are, what your background is, you have shit going on in your life. Like no matter where you're at, and our problems might be big business related problems. Someone else's problems might be a lack of purpose in their life or whatever. Like who knows, or bereavement or whatever. Like who knows. So I actually think everyone in the entire country, if we just take the UK, is carrying something, no matter how big or small. Like we've all got mental health and whatever issues are really large or they're really big or whatever. So personally, like I think it's like I think everyone deserves a space or somewhere to talk or share or connect with how they're feeling. I just think at the moment all of us here probably are in quite a fortunate position where we probably actually could do something. I think there are a lot of people at the moment where support is just completely inaccessible. I just think that's the sad truth at the moment.
I think that's a very fair point. What I'd like to do now is talk a little bit also about the solutions. Like we've talked a lot about the situation, we've talked a lot about the problems, and what would be great now is to give everyone that sat here a few really great tips and a few just handy things to make sure that we're on a day-to-day basis just feeling that little bit more happy. And before we go into that, one of the things that I'm quite curious, actually specifically a question to you, James, is when you're working with the businesses, in some way there's one thing of saying, right, there's no coach at all at the moment, we've got nothing in place, so even just having someone is a massive benefit, and therefore that's our return on investment in some way. But I guess for someone maybe who already has that and sort of needs the next level, how do they measure the return of that? Like how do you measure the happiness of your team and you as an owner? Like are there metrics out there? Are there certain indices that you use?
None. Well, as far as I'm aware, none that are very good, if I'm honest. Yeah, you've got the kind of employee happiness tool, like surveys you can send round, which are pretty good, and they give you a good picture of overall culture and just what's going on in the business. But you might know more than the actual like measuring someone's mental health. I don't, as far as I'm aware, is kind of an age-old like problem that doesn't seem possible to solve. For me, like, look, everything in a business is tracked. Like everything has a return on investment, and like people might not like this answer, but like if you're going to have one thing in your business that you don't you don't actually track, and you just do because it's the right thing to do for your people, then commit to their mental health. Like, yes, we could track it, but really it's just the right thing to do. Like from just, I believe anyway, just from like a human moral standpoint. And actually, if you come at it from that place, I actually think the numbers it's going to affect is retention, sick days, and then there's going to be the intangible stuff, trust, loyalty, motivation, and just if we're going to be really like black and white and commercial, like your employer brand. Like, I'm going to want to work for someone and a workplace that caters for my mental health over one that doesn't, because that's going to be a great place to work. So I think it's hard to put a number to it, and I think in all walks of life we want a number for everything. But I'm not sure mental health works that way, to be honest.
Yeah, it's the one thing we don't. I got asked a similar question by someone the other day from big corporate. How do you us specifically put a return on the money we spend? So we have a happiness team, we have a director of happiness and people, we have a happiness budget, we have a head of happiness, and the head of happiness's role is to show that everyone in the business is happy. She clears a diary every single Wednesday to have happiness meetings with people, very similar to what the guys at Santos do, having someone in the business you can speak to directly. We have a happiness budget which goes towards everything like paying for 5-a-sides, paying for company therapy, paying for us to celebrate national days, and it's the one thing in the business which we have no return on. We don't put it anywhere. It's a budget that has to be spent on maintaining happiness and culture within the business, and it's the most. When I sit there and say to the people like, who's the most important person in the business, it's Kira, who's our director of happiness and people. She is the most important person in our business.
Love it. And you've got a slide.
Oh, we've got a slide, yeah. Yeah. But
I love that. Have you gone down several times?
Several times, yeah. Not in a while. It's like I don't work
head first, or you're more sort
head
of on
first,
the back?
yeah. A few times head first, yeah.
I absolutely love that though. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? Like you go and you think about the new office that you're going into, and everyone puts in the crazy ideas, and you usually don't go through with it, but that's definitely one that went through.
Can I just say,
yeah.
That when I've gone into companies to do sort of wellness workshops with them, because I work in the area of mental health, and I'm surrounded by people who are constantly addressing their mental health and looking at personal development, I've been quite shocked going into companies and being met by the wall of stress that hits you in those rooms. And I guess I'm kind of out of that atmosphere, working in that way, and really quite shocked and surprised at how people work every day in these high stress, no relief environments where their money is, their wages are connected to their bonuses, and it just is incredibly oppressive. You can almost feel it.
Yeah, I mean, just to like continue this point, I think the most important thing that I've seen across every business that Sanctus has ever come into contact with, never mind working with, is leadership. It's the willingness of leadership to invest, as you're saying, Dom, because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah,
right? That is everything, and that if at the end of the day, like, the person running the business or the CFO or whoever makes the decision just isn't interested in mental health at all, and just doesn't believe in that way of working or that type of workplace, then you will never create a culture where people feel safe to openly talk about their mental health at work. It will not happen because the leaders create the culture.
Also, it's like you talk about trying to measure it, but it is like it's a time bomb. It's a ticking time bomb. You can see that it's not possible to sustain that level of stress and pressure for a long period of time. It just, as human beings, we're not really capable of doing that. Something breaks down.
Mm-hmm. And I think there is, from what James was saying as well, a definite generational divide between those who are willing and those who aren't willing to invest in mental health. I think when I speak with our board and CFO, they don't understand it. Even though we've tried to create a place which has got that in vain, it is a lot more, young people are much more conscious and in tune with mental health than an older generation.
Mm. Yeah, it's quite fascinating. So let's talk about some of these tips, some of these solutions, I guess. Obviously, Sanctus is one option. You can use that, but just generally speaking, for example, for you, Dom, I mean, what sort of things do you do to make, like, I guess, somewhat cope or make yourself happier? What are some of the things that you do in your life?
So I think the number one thing I do, I know it's going to sound like a massive cliche and everyone tells you to do it, but the number one thing I do is I'm very open to people. I'm very open on social media, but I'm very open to, I've got a very good support system of people around me who I can say, I'm not feeling good today. This is X, Y, Z that's going on in my life. How are you? And just having that conversation, be able to feel like I'm not alone in my thoughts. So the MD of the agency, we have open conversations. If we're not feeling well, we know to meet 8 o'clock in the morning for a coffee just to chat about what's coming in the day ahead. Have we got anything that's stressful? So it is a cliche, but being open and talking does really, really help you process things that are going on. Aside from that, more like tangible things that I do is, like I was saying earlier, turning the phone off at 9 o'clock to go to actually get some sleep in. Sleep is so important in terms of helping you process things and recover. Another cliche again, but exercise, running. I took up running, very therapeutic, really helps you. But then, more practical, coming into like calendar management, really being on top of your calendar and not overwhelming yourself by leaving yourself a 1 till 2 and a 2 till 3 and thinking, how am I going to get from this place to that place in 5 minutes? And I'm going to let this person down. So, giving yourself enough room outside of meetings to ensure that you're going to be there and actually being able to take notes and be able to then put that information into an email to send to yourself to actually process it rather than just running around like a headless chicken. To-do lists as well, writing things down on a piece of paper, that has such a different impact because once you write it, it's actually real. And just things like, I said the other day, I said, every decision I make in my life, depending on what I'm going to do, my mental health comes first in that decision making. Whether I want to go to an event, whether I want to, whatever I want to eat that day, whatever I'm going to do for the next 2 weeks, I always think, do I want to do this? Is it right for me? Am I going to be okay in this situation? Is it going to be good for my mental health? And then I decide what I want to do.
Yeah, I like the to-do list concept because it's something that I speak to a lot as well to my team about, and so I'm very much a let fires burn, focus on the thing that's going to make the biggest impact type person. So I'm notoriously bad at responding to emails. My inbox is just insane, and people probably hate me for it. I'm sorry if anyone doesn't get responses from me, but I guess I work in a really focused manner and try to go and take, rather than say, okay, I've got these 100 things that I need to do, and then I get to the end of the day and then I didn't get the 100 things done and I beat myself up for it. I actually just go, do you know, what are the 2 from those 100 things that are going to make the biggest impact today for me, that are going to really, I'll get to the end of the day and go, yes, I had a great day, I'm really happy. And everything else just kind of, because you'll never, let's face it, there's always something to do. Mm-hmm. Especially, your business is massive. There must be, there must be so many things to do constantly. And I guess if you're trying to chase everything all the time, you're actually not even going to progress in some way.
And it's also with that kind of communication, being clear to people, don't try and force things to happen. If it's going to take a week, just say it's going to take a week, and you don't put yourself under pressure to turn it around in a short period of time, and because that's going to have a knock-on effect to everything else you're doing around that as well.
Yeah. Any tips from your side?
I think you were hinting at overthinking a little earlier on, weren't you? So if overthinking is something you do, it can often take us down a route that's very unhelpful, cause us to feel a lot of things that we maybe wouldn't necessarily do if we thought less. So a very easy tip is thinking about your breathing and practicing mindfulness and taking yourself away from those thoughts, which can help wind us up even more, or even make things up that aren't even real.
Well, that's interesting. Talk us through that a little bit more.
Making up things that aren't real? Get an example from the audience, probably. Probably everyone's done it. Haven't you? Kind of imagined a situation, if something's going on, and when you actually stop to check it out with that other person, it's not at all going on.
I saw a famous tweet which said, my brain is just a constant string of conspiracy theories against myself.
Yeah,
I thought,
exactly.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, it's a nice description of critical thinking. Which is another lie, another way that we talk to ourselves and tell ourselves a whole lot of crap that's not true. So yeah, turning some of that off, taking some of that out, and you can do that for free. You don't have to be rich to do that. You can just, I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about social media, isn't it? There is a lot of resources out there, so you don't have to spend thousands on therapy necessarily. Yeah. One tip about therapy that if I could pass anything on today would be that if you're having a therapy that works both physically and mentally, that tends to accelerate progress or change, or are you improving, feeling better quicker. So something that includes a breathing technique, for example, or includes EMDR is another good example, something that works.
What's EMDR?
Eye desensitization. Okay. So you use this bilateral part of your brain or process of your brain, and it's a very soothing technique. It helps you deal with more difficult things. You're able to address more difficult things when you use it.
Yeah, and I think just talking about therapy, because I've been through several therapies myself, and also understanding the importance of finding the right person. What is there, like, average numbers, for example, on how many therapists people might go through before they find the right one? Surely there must be a certain...
See, I'm not very stats orientated, so I have absolutely no idea what that might be. But we are always encouraging people to choose somebody that they feel that they can get along with, that they feel that they have a rapport with. So if anybody's familiar with anything, so transference is something that comes up when you're working with therapists. You make the other person somebody from your past. So if you start out on that foot, if I guess a good example of that would be if you go to your GP and they give you somebody and you like, I hate this person. That's going to be a very difficult place to start in the therapeutic relationship in terms of opening up and sharing things with them and having, trusting that person. So we encourage people to choose somebody they feel they have a rapport with and a connection with, and that helps you sort of move into that trusting, vulnerable place more easily.
I think that's a really, really valid point, and it's a lesson that I've learned recently, where basically I was, in my mind, always thinking that if I go through therapy, I need to speak to a woman. And the reason for that, which I found out later in having conversations with Mel about this and really understanding this further, was my dad, and again, and I know this is on camera, and I know he's probably going to see this, and I love you, Dad, you know that, and I know he loves me too, but the reality of it is my dad has let me down a lot in my life, and therefore my trust towards men is definitely hurt in comparison towards women, and the only two people in my life that have consistently been there for me have been my mom and my aunt. So immediately I'm drawn towards speaking to women more openly, more in depth, and feeling like I can trust them more. And it's not even about opening up, it's just the fact that I feel I can trust them more. So that was a real interesting realization. I'm sure if you're ever going to go through this process, you might have this as well. And I think what you were saying as well, which I found quite fascinating, was you can obviously go either route. And I guess there isn't really a pro and a con to either route, but one might be initially a little bit more challenging to do, and I guess that was a bit the conversation that we had, that I was like, no, I don't want to speak to a man. No, no way. But maybe that would be a good thing to do, because then that challenges me a little bit to recalibrate the way I think about my relationship and my trust with
some of the greatest hurts are in that transference. So if you start out with the transference, or when you get to the transference in the relationship, or in your love relationship, because it comes up in love relationships all the time, you think, oh my God, everything's falling apart, this is the worst thing in the world that could ever happen. But actually, you're going to start healing the most difficult thing at that point. So once you hit that difficulty, so you starting in therapy with a man and confronting all those issues with your dad straight away, you're going to get the most healing out of it potentially as well. It could absolutely accelerate it.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
The word tips in mental health always comes up on panels. It's like, can we have some tips? Like, give me some tips.
I already
like,
saw the smirk on your face.
If we were talking about like physical health now, I'd be like, can we have some tips? And one of us would be like, well, just go home and do 10 press-ups, and, you know, or do some pull-ups or stretch this. It's like, I think that everyone wants tips. Like, you know, of course we want tips. We're doers. We're like, oh, you've talked to me about mental health. Like, just tell me what to do now. Like, and it would be great if like we could sit here and say like, get a therapist and it will all be okay. And you know, therapy is probably one of the best things to do for your mental health, but it's not always going to work. Sometimes, actually, there are some bad therapists out there. If the relationship isn't right, you won't feel as safe. You won't experience as much growth. And I would love to like sit here and say like, just go home, everyone, and buy a journal and start journaling. Download Headspace or Calm and meditate, and all will be great. And that's just not the case. And I think, unfortunately, every single person's journey with their mental health is going to start in a different place, and it's going to be extremely unique for everyone. Like, and I think actually that the tip I would give for anyone is to just start where they're at. Like, there might be some people in this room who are like, that therapy sounds great. Like, I'm going to go home, I'm going to find a therapist, I'm going to go straight for it. Where might be other people who are like, are you joking? Like, talking to someone about how I really feel. You know, so I think you got to start where you feel comfortable. And actually, I mentioned journaling because actually for me, like, that was the first place that I felt safe. You know, empty blank page on a journal. I'm just going to write down how I feel. No one's judging me because it's just a piece of paper, and I'll just go for it. I'll go for it there. And actually, that led me to the point where I felt able to like sit down in front of, let's be honest, a stranger and open up, which I'd never ever done before, ever. So having said that, I think personally, I think for me, coaching and therapy or any sort of connection to another human is where I've personally felt the most growth. I don't know of anything else where on the planet, maybe some sort of like 10-day silent meditation or Vipassana or something like that. But in general, from what I see, an actual human-to-human interaction, whether it's through coaching or therapy, or maybe even a group, provides, in my experience, just the most transformation. That's where the most weight gets lifted, you know, if you were making the analogy.
And there's an organization that I work with occasionally, and they sort of say, you know, the hurts happen in connection, and the healing can happen in connection as well. So that's where the healing should happen, is in the place where the hurt happened.
And if you take them points there, if you look at kind of the life cycle that we operate in, we wake up, we read the newspaper in the morning, we check social media, we go to work, we function throughout the day doing what we have to do at work. We go home, we may read a book, we may watch TV, but you ask yourself, how often do you spend quality time with other individuals? How often do you spend quality time with your friends? How often do you spend quality time with your family without having a distraction on in the background, or, you know, being in a social occasion where you're drinking together, or just being, you know, I'm going to have half an hour chat face to face with my mum or my friend, and just have that communication, which, you know, social media, you know, it has fantastic aspects, but it makes us feel like we've always got people there. But the reality is that's not enough to form the meaningful connections to make you feel comfortable and help you through your kind of like any dark period, really.
The other thing that no one wants to hear, I think, is that to work on your mental health always requires a level of vulnerability. Every single time. Like, even if you're writing in a journal entry or talk, to grow in some way, you have to actually open up. And we can give as many tips as we want, but you can do all the tips in the world. But actually, I think to experience true transformation in some way, there's got to be a level of vulnerability which is hard.
And I think that also reflects to and I'm pretty sure I can speak for everyone in the room about this, but every significant tough periods you go through your life, you seem like I think for me the biggest transition in my last 2 years has been my divorce, essentially, and not living with my daughter anymore. I see my daughter every 2 weeks, and that whole thing that I initially took quite lightly. I was like, it's just divorce, but whatever. My parents divorced, my brother's parents divorced, and so on. All the people I knew, it's all fine. But then I actually realized, wow, this was quite a big event in my life, and it suddenly I transitioned so much through that because I learned so much about myself and everything. But it was then a tough period that I went through, and with every tough period you kind of learn. And I guess it's the same thing. You're almost deliberately walking into something that feels like a tough period, but actually it is something that you're going to come out of and learn from. So it's brilliant. Thank you so much for that. I'm conscious of time. I want to give the audience an opportunity as well to ask any questions, or feel free to not. That's fine as well. Totally understand that. But we've got a microphone here. If anyone's got any questions for the great panelists tonight, then Will, can you do the honor? Thank you. Just check, is it working?
Thanks. It's not so much a question as an observation, but I'd be really interested on your views on it. We know the things, by and large, that make us unhappy, but I think we're less good at working out what makes everyone happy. And there's someone who, in trying to develop a positive company culture, has really tried to address this. The thing that comes up so often, and I'm talking about in the work context specifically. So, I get, Dom, that, human contact with friends and so on is very important. But in a work context specifically, having regard to the well-being of our employees is freedom. A number of freedoms I think are really crucial. One is for general happiness, the freedom to get on with your work without a boss breathing down your neck. But also freedom to make decisions, freedom to screw up, and I think very importantly also freedom from blame if things do go wrong. I'd be really interested in your views on that as, agency owners and people who deal with creatives.
I think what James said about leadership, setting the example of mental health, it comes to setting the example of everything. If you penalise someone for making an error, they won't try again because they don't want that feeling of them being brought down on. So it's kind of like, you're completely right. You've got to have that fail fast, learn fast culture, where sometimes we actually champion mistakes because we want to encourage people to fail because otherwise they don't learn. In a work environment, I again, it's what James said about being vulnerable. I put my hand up and say, I'm not perfect, I make mistakes, and that encourages people to kind of have that ethos built into them as well. So again, a lot of it is led by encouraging people who are then at the senior management leadership team to encourage that behaviour.
Can I say two things on that? One is, I don't know how many of you here in the room have children, and especially young children. And when I say young, I mean anything sort of below 5 years. I think you've got the best opportunity from everyone in the room to actually have an impact on this, on their way of dealing with failure in the future. So, perfect example of this, my daughter, we were doing writing the other day, school holiday, she had loads of homework, ridiculous, don't understand. And she was writing the letter S, and I was writing in a certain way, and then I said to her, you got to write it like this. And then she went, no, Daddy, I want to do it my own way. And it clicked, and I just went, do you know what? Yeah, do it your own way. And it's fine. And, if at school someone tells you, no, that's wrong, just do it your own way. It's okay. It's not a problem, And if you get a bad grade around it, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's fine, right? And I think the school system, unfortunately, has a massive impact on how we deal with failure, because the whole grade system in itself, in some ways, is a failure. Because if you're not good at school, if you don't fit into that academic setup, you get bad grades, which automatically labels you as someone that's incapable, and you're constantly thinking, am I not good enough? Am I not whatever? So you really, so if you've got kids, please, 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 start from now and really encourage them to do that now, because at least they won't be as fearful in school, and then later at work, it will already be sort of part of their, I understand it. For me, no one ever told me that it was okay to make mistakes. So there was, no mistakes. The second thing is, we talked about this earlier around, we actually had this conversation around the kids coming out of university and going into a high pressure work environment and working really hard, working long hours and everything, and then, you know, their only real reward is the paycheck at the end in a lot of organizations that are out there. And actually, we speak a lot at Agency Collective about purpose of running your agency, you know, why are you running your agency, all these sort of things, your mission, and the bigger picture thinking around that. Now, when you think about that, most of us do that because we're trying to probably attract the right clients, and possibly even attract the right people in terms of working with us. But we never really think about it, that actually that also has an impact on the happiness of employees, because if they feel that they've got a purpose as part of their job, which is a big part of their life, well, it makes sense that they're going to be a lot happier. Yeah. I mean, I have this conversation with Will and Anne always, and you know, I'm hoping I can say this openly, that, you know, you guys love your job, right? No pressure. But, you know, there's just a feeling of there's a higher purpose in what we're doing, right? And I believe in that, you know, as much as I know you guys do, because we always have a chat around this. And then suddenly the whole salary element is a reward, but it's not just the rewards. And I think that's also a key thing. So just to that point, basically, there's two things.
I think just to expand on that observation, it's like you basically just acknowledge that like the workplace and the culture of the workplace massively impacts people's mental health and their well-being. And actually, I think that's the first biggest step. It's like just an acknowledgement. And I feel like once you've made that acknowledgement, you can go two ways with it. You can think about not everything you do, but in every decision you make, how does it actually affect someone's overall well-being? Like, I think if I look at us, like at Sanctus, we put an enormous amount of pressure on our team. We support people's mental health, great responsibility. You know, people are talking about mental health, talking about depression at lunchtime. You know, it's too much in many ways. So we've had to really think about, okay, what spaces did we create to support people? Like, how do we serve them in that way? You know, I think every business has that. So I think once you've acknowledged it, you can actually design for it, basically.
Just on that note, in terms of creating spaces where, you know, as an agency, you set aside time, we set aside resource. What do you guys think is the kind of best practice? Because it's been very much focused on agency owners, but for kind of helping out the teams that work for us, what do you think are the best practices for that?
I feel like the first thing you've got to do, well, one thing I see in agencies and consultancies, which is really problematic, is client comes first. And I think that as a mantra is just problematic, because if client comes first and you've set aside 2 hours to all sit down and have sessions where you talk to someone or whatever it might be, but client comes first, then they're gone straight away. So I think the first thing I see that's specific to agency owners and consultancies, or anyone that's kind of service driven, is like actually creating boundaries around your work and really sticking to them. And that's really hard to do, but you know, it serves the people basically. And then I think like there are certain things you can do that are paid. You can bring people in, you know, you can bring in coaches, therapists, Sanctus, whoever. But I think there's a lot of stuff you can do for free. Like, one of the most powerful things that we do as a business, which takes a certain level of trust to get there, is we have like a reflective space where we just sit down, whether it's in a team or in a group, and just chat about like, how we feel. Basically, you know, we just sit around and talk about how we feel, and it's incredibly powerful. I think every time, I don't do them enough actually. Sometimes I'll be a bit scared of going because, you know, I'm a leader and I don't want to fully share, and I still do that. But the times I do go and I kind of actually sort of say it how it is in front of my team, I feel incredibly connected to them. I feel better myself, and they know where I'm at, and they look at them and think, oh, actually the guy who's my boss technically is like a real human, and it's great. So I think there are loads of you can create lots of different spaces. You have to have a certain amount of trust to do it, and it might take time to get there, but I think that the boundaries is the first most important piece, I think, for this world in particular, from what I've seen anyway.
I don't know, Jen's point, it needs to feel like you can't just, you know, feel like doing nothing and then the next day be like, hey, we're going to get a therapist for everyone. It needs, because, you know, it's like, you need to, one of the things you do there is bringing someone in, you know, doing the education piece first around what mental health is, the signs, the small symptoms that people could be feeling when you are stressed, etc. And having that open dialogue where someone could, for the first time, be introduced to mental health and have a 5-minute conversation with the person who's come in. Someone, you know, you probably do it, don't you? You're probably go into businesses and say that, and you do it. And that then would essentially create an appetite for people to take them conversations further with that individual, or want to take them passion within the business even further. So what from our side, we, like I said, Kira had every Wednesday she knew that she was on hand for someone in the team to go and talk to. She would just be able to be contactable for any conversation or anything, you know, traditional HR, but actually being more people centric and being like, hey, Wednesday's my day, but you can still get me at any other point throughout the week. So it's I think the need, what we saw worked well was when we did that education piece first, and kind of and then, you know, James said again, having the openness from a leadership team to say I am affected with this, or this is how I feel, or it does have to seem really genuine as well, to get that level of trust to be able to then look at bringing in some of the more drastic things like coaches and things like that as well. Question on the back, yeah?
I've got so many questions, it's hard to pick them all apart, in fact. But in terms of the example that you set as a leader, do you feel you'll see a lot of glorification of how hard it is to be a leader, how that struggle porn, as it gets called on LinkedIn and stuff now, it's so cool to be working 24 hours a day and be really fight like the hustle. As a leader, do you feel a responsibility now to give a different example, to show that actually you don't have to be that kind of guy and you can just be yourself? But are things changing in that respect?
I hate Gary Vee. I don't watch any of his stuff. I think he's a waste of time. That's probably not a very common thing, but I think the perception, he looks ill, honestly. He looks haggard. And he's sat there telling people, do more, do more, do more. And it's just Americanized crap of like repeating things over and over again until they become gospel. And he doesn't actually say anything useful in anything he says. So that's my rant over. But yes, you know, that kind of Gary Vee culture, and I think he is very much to blame for that culture of, you know, not sleeping, working hard, isn't a true reflection of what it needs to take to be a leader. James said it earlier, you know, you thought we had to stay up late to work and constantly working. This is how you do it. You do hard work determination. That period for me was the most unproductive ever, because you couldn't stay into the office until 10 o'clock at night. But after 8, you just probably sat there on YouTube, you know, a bit thinking about your thoughts, been like, not really doing anything here, it's better. And I think I take responsibility for it internally to tell people in the team to, you know, go home, sleep, rest, recover. Don't have to always be seen to be working. It's not healthy. So no Instagramming that I'm in the office late, or showing the team that I'm working late. No talking to them after like 8 o'clock. You know, let the team recover and rest. Set that as an example for how you want people to communicate. You know, I used to think it was cool for a client to get an email at 10:30, being like, "Oh, we're working really hard on your account. You can see by this email at 10:30." The client sits there and thinks, "He's not very organised. If he's emailing me at 10:30 at night, God, has he got nothing better to do?" Not, "Oh my God."
Or has he not
impressive.
got enough to do?
Or is he, yeah, exactly. So I don't think there's any benefits in portraying the Gary Vee culture. I'll never do it.
Can I just also give another perspective on that? So I wanted to talk about this earlier as well, a little bit about you know, the exercise side of things and stuff. So exercise is a massive coping mechanism for me, like no question about it. That mindfulness space that you're talking about, I get that from exercise. So at the moment I'm boxing and I love it. For 2 hours I get destroyed. I get killed. I'm in a proper box gym. It's not like you know, you're just walking, like they don't care, right? And maybe this is a bad thing in some way, but it sort of works for me because my mind, I just can't think about anything anymore other than the fact that I'm so exhausted. There's also this element of massive amount of drive in me as a person generally. Like I'm very driven. I see something and I go that and that. I realized over time that the bit I need to appreciate is the process, and definitely much more than the actual result. But now I've lost train of thought. I was trying to get to the point there. There's something around so I guess I love working because I love what I do, and it's quite difficult sometimes for me to stop. And it's not because I'm feeling tired and like, if I feel tired, no question, like I'll definitely like go, right, that's it, I'm going to bed, there's no way. But there's definitely times where I'll work late, very late night. Maybe I'll work till, like when we did the content library, we had this thing, and I was like, there was definitely at least a week where there was a couple of 2 a.m. nights and stuff, and just because I really enjoyed it, and I know that what I'm going to do and what we're going to do and what we're going to release to the community is going to be great, and everyone's going to love it and stuff. And I guess there's this element as well of that, like,
did you
loving too much when you love what you do, and you work a lot because of that.
Did you Instagram like you were working till 2 a.m.? So that's the problem when this kind of culture around like hustle, hard work is like, are you working because you love it, or are you working just to show people that you're working?
Yeah.
And that's where you do it because of love. You don't need to tell anyone. Obviously you're saying it here because we're talking about it.
Yeah.
But you didn't go and brag about it or shout about it. You did it because you loved it.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something?
Oh, just there's that fine line between knowing when you're doing something because you love it but you're actually addicted to it. It's like, where is that line? It'll be different for everyone.
I've noticed to your question on leadership. I've noticed that basically you as a leader in your business, whether you're the founder or you're a leader or whatever, you're a role model for your people. So at the moment, like if I'm honest, actually, I think we've got a bit of a problem in Sanctus of people being over-identified with our brand, which is like a great problem, but it's still a problem, and that's because I am. Like Sanctus is like it's a massive, massive part of my life, arguably too big a chunk of my life, and I'm consumed by it. And if I'm obsessed by my work, and if I have nothing else in my life that is part of my identity, then you bet the people who work for Sanctus are going to be the same. Because as the founder, as a leader, you're like a parent of the family. You role model, so people are going to do as you do. There was a point at Sanctus where for some reason I was getting, me and George, who's my co-founder, we just get in at 8 every day. So everyone else got in at 8 every day. But then we start coming in at 9 every day, and everyone comes in at 9. And that's just how it goes. So you're a role model, I think. So I think if you can start to be more authentic or more yourself in whatever way, then you're going to give permission for more people to do that, basically.
Love that. Got time for one more question. Sorry. Yeah.
So I don't know if I can express it. It's all kind of floating around a bit vaguely in my head, but I feel like there's been a shift, towards more of an awareness around mental health issues and the fact that it's acceptable to talk about them, and maybe that we all have them. But separately, I've seen a shift towards spirituality and maybe like alternative approaches. Obviously, for example, we talk about headspace here and different kinds of things. I think you mentioned yoga as well. So I've been microdosing for a little while, and I've kind of experimented with some plant medicine type approaches. Really, for me, out of every possible therapeutic approach I've taken in my life, it's been by far the most drastically positive and revolutionary in my state of being. When I've done all different kinds of talking therapies, or even the more radical things like EFT tapping and things like that, I have seen some benefits. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying one thing's better than another, but in terms of an overnight change from basically where I was at, where I wasn't even going into work every day, or sometimes sleeping into the afternoon, I was that depressed at one point, to really just taking over the world every day. People say, how are you today? Literally say, amazing, and it's like, oh wow, amazing. I'm like, well, no, that's pretty normal. It's always amazing at the moment. So, that's the kind of level of step change that I felt. To me, the question is there going to be some kind of triangulation between the awareness of mental health, the impact of what spiritual practices can do, maybe bringing them into the forefront in society as more of an acceptable thing to discuss, and maybe even plant medicine within that.
So the science is really out on plant medicine at the moment, but it's not ruled out, you know, that it might not there's some sort of scientific reason why it works. And so they're still sort of trying to figure out what it is, how it actually works, but it has been proven to work, and I think that is quite controversial.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm
just, I know
that, but I'm saying from you guys' perspective, obviously the experts, what do you think?
The way I see the world going is that mental health will kind of diversify as a market and commoditize as a market like physical health. And I think if you look at how physical health's gone, 50 years ago, no one worked on their physical health. Like they didn't. No one went running. Was like jogging was seen as something that like athletes did, right? And then look how far it's changed now. CrossFit, boxing. I mean, fucking hell, you name it. You can do like 30 different types of yoga. Like a billion different protein shakes, like supplements. Like look at how it's look at the amount of investment and the amount of spend and we put into our body, basically. And basically the way I see it is it's going to be the same for the mind. Like, and I think you've touched on a few different things. I think psychedelics. I can see that being the protein shake for the mind. Like I wouldn't be surprised. I think all of these things, all of these ways of working on your mental health in the next 5 to 10 years are going to become increasingly popular, basically, because people want to work on it. You know, coaching, therapy are going to explode, meditation's exploding, and there will be many, many more, basically, of which I would say, you know, plant medicines or psychedelics will potentially be one of them, but the jury's kind of out on them a little bit. If
you break it down to what happiness is, it's a chemical reaction within your brain. That chemical reaction obviously has other factors to it, but can you synthesize that reaction with medicine and with other drugs potentially? Yeah. Could it come to a point where you can take a happy pill? Dangerous question, but.
I did have a part 2, which is reminding actually, which is basically neural pathways obviously are formed in the mind through repetition. So in the same way that, as you're pointing out, if you're told many times under the age of 5 that you're going to fail in some way, that you'll start to form that belief system. What I've noticed is by behaving differently or feeling differently after a time, when you take that thing away, you've already got that neural pathway formed, so your own belief system is there. So I guess, would you see those things maybe as tools for changing your own patterns, or is that risky?
The psychedelics?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's how they work. I mean, that would be my guess as to how they work. It's a real big, you know, shock to the neural pathways. But I am in the throes of opening up exactly what you're asking for there. My next practice, should the offer go through, will be bringing classical psychotherapy right up next to the spiritual and the alternative, as well as the physical. So yeah.
If you break that reprogramming aspect of brainwaves is just very similar to what CBT is, in terms of just reprogramming your brain to react differently to a stimulus. And you know, so is it possible for that to be synthesized and fast-tracked by just doing it and having that stimulus response? Yeah. So like my bad, when I used to have a negative feeling and feel really down, I used to have a burger, and that stopped me from drinking. That was my kind of replacement. And over time, I'd go straight from stimulus to burger and wouldn't even think about alcohol in the middle. And then I managed to essentially, through that, my stimulus would be that I wanted to eat. So I put on like 4 stone, got really, really fat. But I managed to, over time, turn that burger from being a burger to being steamed salmon and broccoli. So I reprogrammed my brain to when I ever felt really anxious and really bad and had a bad day at work, from wanting to have a beer or a glass of wine to craving steamed broccoli and salmon. So of course, you know, that kind of thing, if you take it, obviously that's kind of much more of a long process, but the basic down, that stimulus response still exists for me.
Great. Can I just say one last, the last thing I would say on that is, I think what's going to happen is, as the market kind of develops, basically, you're going to get all these different practices of ways in which you work on your mental health. And if we look at how that's happened in physical health, there are some really bad ways that you can work on your physical health. Like there are some really underqualified personal trainers that I could go to and I'll actually pop my back out, right? And I think the concern across mental health is that's going to happen in mental health. And there are going to be some cowboy practitioners dishing out cowboy practices, which is going to do some real damage to people. So I think my concern for the mental health market is that it really needs some like trusted quality brands essentially in the market to kind of provide safety and trust, because, you know, like the thing that we're dealing with here is like people's lives essentially. So I'm all for all of this new ways of working with brands. I'll be the first to try it, trust me, I love it. But I'm also kind of well aware that we're going to need, the market in general is going to need much more regulation and transparency, because you know, mistakes in this area are extremely costly.
It's very risky that in itself. If you look at the one flew in the cuckoo's nest dynamic between big pharma and God knows what else, you know, you've got to be careful with that.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting, because I think the type of person that's being introduced to me most beyond agency owners at the moment are coaches. You can't imagine, like, I am being introduced to hundreds of coaches currently.
We're all coaches, aren't we?
Yeah, and well, this is the thing, right? It's a bit like the you know, what the film industry went through with photography. Everyone's a photographer now. Everyone's a coach now, and it's like people, you know, been doing it for 2 months and they call themselves qualified coaches, and it's like, you know, be really careful with that as well. I'm really conscious of time. I absolutely would love to talk more about this. We do have still time to chat in the bar. Hopefully some of you can stick around as well. I don't know, Dom, if you have to go back to Manchester tonight. Perfect. So thank you so much for giving up your valuable time to talking about this very important topic. And please, round of applause for the panelists.